Title, 10. Call to Prayers, Adhaan. 1. Narrated Anas, the people mentioned the fire and the bell, they suggested those as signals to indicate the starting of prayers, and by that they mentioned the Jews and the Christians. Then Bilal was ordered to pronounce Adhaan for the prayer by saying its wordings twice, and for the Iqama, the call for the actual standing for the prayers in rows, by saying its wordings once. Iqama is pronounced when the people are ready for the prayer. 2. Narrated Ibn Umar, when the Muslims arrived at Medina, they used to assemble for the prayer, and used to guess the time for it. During those days, the practice of Adhaan for the prayers had not been introduced yet. Once they discussed this problem regarding the call for prayer. Some people suggested the use of a bell like the Christians, others proposed a trumpet like the horn used by the Jews, but Umar was the first to suggest that a man should call, the people, for the prayer, so Allah's Messenger ordered Bilal to get up and pronounce the Adhaan for prayers. 3. Narrated Anas, Bilal was ordered to repeat the wording of the Adhaan for prayers twice, and to pronounce the wording of the Iqama once except Q80 Kamati Salat. 4. Narrated Anas bin Malik, when the number of Muslims increased they discussed the question as to how to know the time for the prayer by some familiar means. Some suggested that a fire be lit at the time of the prayer, and others put forward the proposal to ring the bell. Bilal was ordered to pronounce the wording of Adhaan twice and of the Iqama once only. 5. Narrated Abu Kalaba, Anas said, Bilal was ordered to pronounce the wording of Adhaan twice and of Iqama once only. The sub-narrator Ismail said, I mentioned that to Ayyub and he added, to that, except Iqama, i.e. Kadkamat, is Salat which should be said twice. 6. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger, said, when the Adhaan is pronounced Satan takes to his heels and passes wind with noise during his flight in order not to hear the Adhaan. When the Adhaan is completed he comes back and again takes to his heels when the Iqama is pronounced, and after its completion he returns again till he whispers into the heart of the person, to divert his attention from his prayer, and makes him remember things which he does not recall to his mind before the prayer and that causes him to forget how much he has prayed. 7. Narrated Abdurrahman Abu said Al-Qudri told my father, I see you liking sheep and the wilderness. So whenever you are with your sheep or in the wilderness and you want to pronounce Adhaan for the prayer, raise your voice in doing so, for whoever hears the Adhaan, whether a human being, a jinn or any other creature, will be a witness for you on the day of resurrection. Abu said added, I heard it, this narration, from Allah's Messenger. 8. Narrated Humayd, Anas bin Malik said, whenever the Prophet went out with us to fight, in Allah's cause, against any nation, he never allowed us to attack till morning, and he would wait and see. If he heard Adhaan he would postpone the attack, and if he did not hear Adhaan he would attack them. Anas added, we reached Khaybar at night, and in the morning when he did not hear the Adhaan for the prayer, he, the Prophet, rode and I rode behind Abi Talha and my foot was touching that of the Prophet. The inhabitants of Khaybar came out with their baskets and spades, and when they saw the Prophet, they shouted, Muhammad! By Allah, Muhammad and his army. When Allah's Messenger saw them, he said, Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Khaybar is ruined. Whenever we approach a hostile nation to fight, then evil will be the morning of those who have been warned. 9. Narrated Abu said Al-Qudri, Allah's Messenger, said, whenever you hear the Adhaan, say what the Mu'adhin is saying. 10. Narrated Isa bin Talha that he had heard Muawiyah repeating the words of Adhaan up to, Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, and I testify that Muhammad is Allah's Messenger. 11. Narrated Yahya as above, 586, and added, some of my companions told me that Hisham had said, when the Mu'adhin said, Hayya la salah, come for the prayer. Muawiyah said, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, there is neither might nor any power except with Allah, and added, we heard your Prophet saying the same. 12. Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah, Allah's Messenger, said, whoever after listening to the Adhaan says, Allahumma rabba hadihida wadat tama, was saladul qaima, atm Muhammadan al-wasalata wal-fadila, Wabathu makaman mamudanayal ladi watahu, O Allah. Lord of this perfect call, perfect by not ascribing partners to you, and of the regular prayer which is going to be established, give Muhammad the right of intercession and illustriousness, and resurrect him to the best and the highest place in paradise that you promised him, then my intercession for him will be allowed on the day of resurrection. 13. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger, said, if the people knew the reward for pronouncing the Adhan and for standing in the first row, in congregational prayers, and found no other way to get that except by drawing lots, they would draw lots, and if they knew the reward of the Zuhr prayer, in the early moments of its stated time, they would race for it, go early, and if they knew the reward of Isha and Far, morning prayers in congregation, they would come to offer them even if they had to crawl. 14. Narrated Abdullah bin al-Harith, once on a rainy muddy day, Ibn Abbas delivered a sermon in our presence, and when the mu'adhin pronounced the Adhan and said, Hayya ala salah, come for the prayer, Ibn Abbas ordered him to say, pray at your homes. The people began to look at each other, surprisingly. Ibn Abbas said, it was done by one who was much better than I, i.e. the Prophet, or his mu'adhin, and it is a license. 15. Narrated Salim bin Abdullah, my father said that Allah's apostle said, Bilal pronounces Adhan at night, so keep on eating and drinking, sure, till Ibn Maktum pronounces Adhan. Salim added, he was a blind man who would not pronounce the Adhan unless he was told that the day had dawned. 16. Narrated Hafsa, when the mu'adhin pronounced the Adhan for Far prayer and the dawn became evident, the Prophet ordered a 2-rakat light prayer, sunnah, before the iqamah of the compulsory, congregational, prayer. 17. Narrated Aisha, the Prophet used to offer 2 light rakat between the Adhan and the iqamah of the Far prayer. 18. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar, Allah's Messenger, said, Bilal pronounces the Adhan at night, so keep on eating and drinking, sure, till Ibn Maktum pronounces the Adhan. 19. Narrated Abdullah bin Masud, the Prophet, said, the Adhan pronounced by Bilal should not stop you from taking sure, for he pronounces the Adhan at night, so that the one offering the late night prayer, tahajjud, from among you might hurry up and the sleeping from among you might wake up. It does not mean that dawn or morning has started. Then he, the Prophet, pointed with his fingers and raised them up, towards the sky, and then lowered them, towards the earth, like this. Ibn Masud imitated the gesture of the Prophet. Az-Zuri gestured with his 2 index fingers which he put on each other and then stretched them to the right and left. These gestures illustrate the way Real dawn appears. It spreads left and right horizontally. The dawn that appears in the high sky and lowers down is not the real dawn. 20. Narrated Aisha, the Prophet, said, Bilal pronounces the Adhan at night, so eat and drink, sure, till Ibn Maktum pronounces the Adhan. 21. Narrated Abdullah bin Mughafal al-Mazani, Allah's Messenger, said thrice, there is a prayer between the 2 Adhans, Adhan and Iqamah, and added, for the one who wants to pray. 22. Narrated Anas bin Malik, when the mu'adhin pronounced the Adhan, some of the companions of the Prophet would proceed to the pillars of the mosque, for the prayer, till the Prophet arrived, and in this way they used to pray 2 rakat before the Maghrib prayer. There used to be a little time between the Adhan and the Iqamah. Shuba said, there used to be a very short interval between the 2, Adhan and Iqamah. 23. Narrated Aisha, Allah's Messenger, used to pray 2 light rakat before the morning, compulsory, prayer after the day dawned and the mu'adhin had finished his Adhan. He then would lie on his right side till the mu'adhin came to pronounce the Iqamah. 24. Narrated Abdullah bin Mughafal, the Prophet said, there is a prayer between the 2 Adhans, Adhan and Iqamah, there is a prayer between the 2 Adhans. And then while saying it the 3rd time he added, for the one who wants to pray. 25. Narrated Malik bin Huwairith, I came to the Prophet, with some men from my tribe and stayed with him for 20 nights. He was kind and merciful to us. When he realized our longing for our families, he said to us, go back and stay with your families and teach them the religion, and offer the prayer, and one of you should pronounce the Adhan for the prayer when its time is due, and the oldest one amongst you should lead the prayer. 26. Narrated Abu Dhar, we were in the company of the Prophet, on a journey, and the Muaddin wanted to pronounce the Adhan for the Zuhr prayer. The Prophet said to him, "Let it become cooler." Then he again wanted to pronounce the Adhan, but the Prophet said to him, "Let it become cooler." The Muaddin again wanted to pronounce the Adhan for the prayer, but the Prophet said, "Let it become cooler, till the shadows of the hillocks become equal to their sizes." The Prophet added, "The severity of the heat is from the raging of hell." 27. Narrated Malik bin Huwairith. Two men came to the Prophet, with the intention of a journey. The Prophet said, "When both of you set out, pronounce Adhan and then Iqama, and the oldest of you should lead the prayer." 28. Narrated Malik, "We came to the Prophet, and stayed with him for 20 days and nights. We were all young and of about the same age. The Prophet was very kind and merciful. When he realized our longing for our families, he asked about our homes and the people there, and we told him. Then he asked us to go back to our families and stay with them and teach them the religion, and to order them to do good things. He also mentioned some other things which I have remembered or forgotten." The Prophet then added, "Pray as you have seen me praying, and when it is the time for the prayer, one of you should pronounce the Adhan and the oldest of you should lead the prayer." 29. Narrated Nafi. Once in a cold night, Ibn Umar pronounced the Adhan for the prayer at Dajnan, the name of a mountain, and then said, "Pray at your homes," and informed us that Allah's Messenger used to tell the Muaddin to pronounce Adhan and say, "Pray at your homes," at the end of the Adhan on a rainy or a very cold night during the journey. 30. Narrated Aun bin Abi Juhayfa. My father said, "I saw Allah's Messenger at a place called Al-Abta. Bilal came and informed him about the prayer, and then came out with a short spear, or stick, and planted it in front of Allah's Messenger at Al-Abta and pronounced the Iqama." 31. Narrated Aun bin Abi Juhayfa. My father said, "I saw Bilal turning his face from side to side while pronouncing the Adhan for the prayer." 32. Narrated Abdullah bin Abi Qatada. My father said, "While we were praying with the Prophet, he heard the noise of some people. After the prayer he said, 'What is the matter?' They replied, 'We were hurrying for the prayer.' He said, 'Do not make haste for the prayer, and whenever you come for the prayer, you should come with calmness, and pray whatever you get, with the people, and complete the rest which you have missed." 33. Narrated Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, "When you hear the Iqama, proceed to offer the prayer with calmness and solemnity, and do not make haste. And pray whatever you are able to pray, and complete whatever you have missed." 34. Narrated Abdullah bin Abi Qatada. My father said, "Allah's Messenger said, if the Iqama is pronounced, then do not stand for the prayer till you see me in front of you." 35. Narrated Abdullah bin Abi Qatada. My father said, Allah's Messenger said, "If the Iqama is pronounced, then do not stand for the prayer till you see me in front of you, and do it calmly." 36. Narrated Abu Huraira. Allah's Messenger went out of the mosque when the Iqama had been pronounced and the rows straightened. The Prophet stood at his musalla, praying place, and we waited for the Prophet to begin the prayer with takbir. He left and asked us to remain in our places. We kept on standing till the Prophet returned and the water was trickling from his head, for he had taken a bath of janaba. 37. Narrated Abu Huraira. Once Iqama was pronounced and the people had straightened the rows, Allah's Messenger went forward to lead the prayer, but he was junub, so he said, "Remain in your places." And he went out, took a bath and returned with water trickling from his head. Then he led the prayer. 38. Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah. On the day of Al-Khandak, the trench, Umar bin al-Khattab went to the Prophet and said, "O Allah's Messenger, by Allah, I could not pray the Asr till the sun had set." Umar told this to the Prophet at the time when a fasting person had done iftar, taken his meals. The Prophet then went to Adhaan and I was with him. He performed ablution and offered the Asr prayer after the sun had set, and then the Maghrib prayer. 39. Narrated Anas. Once the Iqama was pronounced and the Prophet was talking to a man, in a low voice, in a corner of the mosque, and he did not lead the prayer till some of the people had slept dozed in a sitting posture. 40. Narrated Anas bin Malik. Once Iqama was pronounced, a man came to the Prophet, and detained him, from the prayer. 41. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger, said, by him in whose hand my soul is, I was about to order for collecting firewood, fuel, and then order someone to pronounce the Adhaan for the prayer, and then order someone to lead the prayer. Then I would go from behind and burn the houses of men who did not present themselves for the compulsory congregational prayer. By him, in whose hands my soul is, if any one of them had known that he would get a bone covered with good meat or 2 small pieces of meat present in between 2 ribs, he would have turned up for the Isha prayer. 42. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar, Allah's Messenger, said, the prayer in congregation is 27 times superior to the prayer offered by person alone. 43. Narrated Abu Said al-Khudri, the Prophet, said, the prayer in congregation is 25 times superior to the prayer offered by person alone. 44. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger, said, the reward of the prayer offered by a person in congregation is 25 times greater than that of the prayer offered in one's house or in the market, alone. And this is because if he performs ablution and does it perfectly and then proceeds to the mosque with the sole intention of praying, then for every step he takes towards the mosque, he is upgraded 1 degree in reward, and his one sin is taken off, crossed out, from his accounts of deeds. When he offers his prayer, the angels keep on asking Allah's blessings and Allah's forgiveness for him as long as he is staying at his musalla. They say, O Allah, bestow your blessings upon him, be merciful and kind to him. And one is regarded in prayer as long as one is waiting for the prayer. 45. Narrated Abu Salama bin Abdur Rahman, Abu Huraira said, I heard Allah's Messenger, saying, the reward of a prayer in congregation is 25 times greater than that of a prayer offered by a person alone. The angels of the night and the angels of the day gather at the time of far prayer. Abu Huraira then added, recite the holy book if you wish, for, indeed, the recitation of the Quran in the early dawn, far prayer, is ever witnessed. 17. Smiley face. 46. Narrated Abdullah bin Umar, the reward of the congregational prayer is 27 times greater than that of the prayer offered by a person alone. 47. Narrated Salim, I heard ad-Darda saying, Abu ad-Darda entered the house in an angry mood. I said to him, what makes you angry? He replied, by Allah, I do not find the followers of Muhammad doing those good things, which they used to do before, except the offering of congregational prayer. This happened in the last days of Abu ad-Darda during the rule of Uthman. 48. Narrated Abu Musa, the Prophet, said, the people who get tremendous reward for the prayer are those who are farthest away from the mosque, and then those who are next farthest, and so on. Similarly, one who waits to pray with the Imam has greater reward than one who prays and goes to bed. 49. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger, said, while a man was going on a way, he saw a thorny branch and removed it from the way, and Allah became pleased by his action and forgave him for that. Then the Prophet said, 5 are martyrs, one who dies of plague, one who dies of an abdominal disease, one who dies of drowning, one who is buried alive, and dies, and one who is killed in Allah's cause. The Prophet further said, if the people knew the reward for pronouncing the Adhaan and for standing in the first row, in the congregational prayer, and found no other way to get it except by drawing lots, they would do so, and if they knew the reward of offering the Zuhr prayer early, in its stated time, they would race for it, and if they knew the reward for Isha and far prayers in congregation, they would attend them even if they were to crawl. 50. Narrated Humayd Anas said, the Prophet said, O Bani Salima, don't you think that for every step of yours that you take towards the mosque, there is a reward, while coming for prayer? Mujahid said, regarding Allah's statement, we record that which they have sent before them, and their traces, 36.12. Their traces means, their steps. And Anas said that the people of Bani Salima wanted to shift to a place near the Prophet, but Allah's Messenger disliked the idea of leaving their houses uninhabited and said, don't you think that you will get the reward for your footprints? Mujahid said, their footprints mean their footsteps and they're going on foot. 51. Narrated Abu Huraira, the Prophet, said, no prayer is heavier upon the hypocrites than the Fajr and the Isha prayers, and if they knew what is in them, in reward, they would have attended them, even if it was crawling. Certainly, I felt the urge to order the Muadhin, call maker, so that he would pronounce Iqama, then order a man to lead the people, in prayer, then take a flame of fire so that I burn the houses, upon those who had not left for the prayer yet. 52. Narrated Malik bin Huwairith, Prophet said, to two persons, whenever the prayer time becomes due, you should pronounce Adhaan and then Iqama, and the older of you should lead the prayer. 53. Narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger, said, the angels keep on asking for Allah's blessing and forgiveness for any one of you as long as he is at his musalla, praying place, and does not do hadith, passes wind. The angels say, O Allah! Forgive him and be merciful to him. Each one of you is in the prayer as long as he is waiting for the prayer, and nothing but the prayer detains him from going to his family. 54. Narrated Abu Huraira, the Prophet, said, Allah will give shade to 7, on the day when there will be no shade but his. These 7 persons are, a just ruler, a youth who has been brought up in the worship of Allah, i.e. worships Allah sincerely from childhood, a man whose heart is attached to the mosques, i.e. to pray the compulsory prayers in the mosque in congregation, 2 persons who love each other only for Allah's sake and they meet and part in Allah's cause only, a man who refuses the call of a charming woman of noble birth for illicit intercourse with her and says, I am afraid of Allah, a man who gives charitable gifts so secretly that his left hand does not know what his right hand has given, i.e. nobody knows how much he has given in charity, and a person who remembers Allah in seclusion and his eyes are then flooded with tears. 55. Narrated Humayd, Anas was asked, did Allah's Messenger wear a ring? He said, yes. Once he delayed the Isha prayer till midnight, and after the prayer, he faced us and said, the people prayed and have slept and you remained in prayer as long as you waited for it. Anas added, as if I were just now observing the glitter of his ring. 56. Narrated Abu Huraira, the Prophet, said, Allah will prepare for him who goes to the mosque, every morning and in the afternoon, for the congregational prayer, an honorable place in paradise with good hospitality for what he has done, every morning and afternoon goings. 57. Narrated Malik ibn Buhayna, Allah's Messenger, passed by a man praying 2 rakat after the Iqama had been pronounced. When Allah's Messenger completed the prayer, the people gathered around him, the Prophet, or that man, and Allah's Messenger said to him, protesting, are there 4 rakat in Fajr prayer? Are there 4 rakat in Fajr prayer? 58. Narrated Al-Aswad, we were with Aisha discussing the regularity of offering the prayer and dignifying it. She said, when Allah's Messenger fell sick with the fatal illness and when the time of prayer became due and Adhaan was pronounced, he said, tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in prayer. He was told that Abu Bakr was a soft-hearted man and would not be able to lead the prayer in his place. The Prophet gave the same order again, but he was given the same reply. He gave the order for the 3rd time and said, you, women, are the companions of Joseph. Tell Abu Bakr to lead the prayer. So Abu Bakr came out to lead the prayer. In the meantime the condition of the Prophet improved a bit and he came out with the help of 2 men, one on each side. As if I was observing his legs dragging on the ground owing to the disease. Abu Bakr wanted to retreat, but the Prophet beckoned him to remain at his place, and the Prophet was brought till he sat beside Abu Bakr. Al-Amash was asked, was the Prophet praying and Abu Bakr following him, and were the people following Abu Bakr in that prayer? Al-Amash replied in the affirmative with a nod of his head. Abu Muawiyah said, the Prophet was sitting on the left side of Abu Bakr who was praying while standing. 59. Narrated Aisha, when the Prophet became seriously ill and his disease became aggravated, he asked for permission from his wives to be nursed in my house, and he was allowed. He came out with the help of 2 men and his legs were dragging on the ground. He was between Al-Abbas and another man. Ubaydullah said, I told Ibn Abbas what Aisha had narrated, and he said, do you know who was the second man whose name Aisha did not mention? I said, no. Ibn Abbas said, he was Ali ibn Abi Talib. 60. Narrated Nafi. Once on a very cold and stormy night, Ibn Umar pronounced the Adhan for the prayer and then said, pray in your homes. He, Ibn Umar, added, on very cold and rainy nights Allah's Messenger used to order the Mu'adhin to say, pray in your homes. 61. Narrated Mahmud bin Rabi al-Ansari. Itban bin Malik used to lead his people, tribe, in prayer and was a blind man. He said to Allah's apostle, O Allah's Messenger, at times it is dark and flood water is flowing in the valley, and I am blind man, so please pray at a place in my house so that I can take it as a musalla, praying place. So Allah's Messenger went to his house and said, where do you like me to pray? Itban pointed to a place in his house and Allah's Messenger offered the prayer there. 62. Narrated Abdullah bin al-Harith. Ibn Abbas addressed us on a rainy and muddy day, and when the Mu'adhin said, come for the prayer, Ibn Abbas ordered him to say, pray in your homes. The people began to look at one another with surprise as if they did not like it. Ibn Abbas said, it seems that you thought ill of it, but no doubt it was done by one who was better than I, i.e. the Prophet. The prayer, is a strict order and I dislike to bring you out. Ibn Abbas narrated the same as above, but he said, I did not like you to make you sinful, in refraining from coming to the mosque, and to come to the mosque, covered with mud up to the knees. 63. Narrated Abu Said al-Khudri, a cloud came and it rained till the roof started leaking, and in those days the roof used to be of the branches of date palms. Iqama was pronounced and I saw Allah's Messenger prostrating in water and mud, and even I saw the mark of mud on his forehead. 64. Narrated Anas bin Sirin. I heard Anas saying, a man from Ansar said to the Prophet, I cannot pray with you in congregation. He was a very fat man and he prepared a meal for the Prophet, and invited him to his house. He spread out a mat for the Prophet, and washed one of its sides with water, and the Prophet prayed 2 rakat on it. A man from the family of Al-Jarud asked, did the Prophet used to pray the duha, forenoon, prayer? Anas said, I did not see him praying the duha prayer except on that day. 65. Narrated Aisha, the Prophet said, if supper is served, and iqama is pronounced, one should start with the supper. 66. Narrated Anas bin Malik, Allah's Messenger said, if the supper is served, start having it before praying the Maghrib prayer and do not be hasty in finishing it. 67. Narrated Nafi, Ibn Umar said, Allah's Messenger said, if the supper is served for any one of you and the iqama is pronounced, start with the supper and don't be in haste, and carry on eating till you finish it. If food was served for Ibn Umar and iqama was pronounced, he never came to the prayer till he finished it, i.e. food, in spite of the fact that he heard the recitation of the Quran by the Imam in the prayer. 68. Narrated Ibn Umar, the Prophet said, if any one of you is having his meals, he should not hurry up till he is satisfied, even if the prayer has been started. 69. Narrated Ja'far bin Amr bin Umayyah, my father said, I saw Allah's Messenger eating a piece of meat from the shoulder of a sheep, and he was called for the prayer. He stood up, put down the knife and prayed, but did not perform ablution. 70. Narrated Al-Aswad that he asked Aisha, what did the Prophet used to do in his house? She replied, he used to keep himself busy serving his family, and when it was the time for prayer he would go for it. 71. Narrated Ayyub, Abu Kalaba said, Malik bin Huwairith came to this mosque of ours and said, I pray in front of you, and my aim is not to lead the prayer but to show you the way in which the Prophet used to pray. I asked Abu Kalaba, how did he used to pray? He replied, the Prophet used to pray like this sheikh of ours, and the sheikh used to sit for a while after the prostration, before getting up after the first rakah. 72. Narrated Abu Musa, the Prophet became sick, and when his disease became aggravated, he said, tell Abu Bakr to lead the prayer. Aisha said, he is a soft-hearted man and would not be able to lead the prayer in your place. The Prophet said again, tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in prayer. She repeated the same reply, but he said, tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in prayer. You are the companions of Joseph. So the messenger went to Abu Bakr with that order, and he led the people in prayer in the lifetime of the Prophet. 73, narrated Aisha, the mother of the believers, Allah's messenger, in his illness said, tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in prayer. I said to him, if Abu Bakr stands in your place, the people would not hear him owing to his excessive weeping. So please order Umar to lead the prayer. Aisha added, I said to Hafsa, say to him, if Abu Bakr should lead the people in the prayer in your place, the people would not be able to hear him owing to his weeping, so please, order Umar to lead the prayer. Hafsa did so, but Allah's apostle said, keep quiet. You are verily the companions of Joseph. Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. Hafsa said to Aisha, I never got anything good from you. 74, narrated Az-Zuri, Anas bin Malik al-Ansari, told me, Abu Bakr used to lead the people in prayer during the fatal illness of the Prophet, till it was Monday. When the people aligned, in rows, for the prayer, the Prophet lifted the curtain of his house and started looking at us and was standing at that time. His face was glittering, like a page of the Quran, and he smiled cheerfully. We were about to be put to trial for the pleasure of seeing the Prophet. Abu Bakr retreated to join the row as he thought that the Prophet would lead the prayer. The Prophet beckoned us to complete the prayer and he let the curtain fall. On the same day he died. 75, narrated Anas, the Prophet did not come out for 3 days. The people stood for the prayer and Abu Bakr went ahead to lead the prayer. In the meantime, the Prophet caught hold of the curtain and lifted it. When the face of the Prophet appeared, we had never seen a scene more pleasing than the face of the Prophet, as it appeared then. The Prophet beckoned to Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer and then let the curtain fall. We did not see him again till he died. 76, narrated Hamza bin Abdullah, my father said, when Allah's messenger became seriously ill, he was told about the prayer. He said, tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. Aisha said, Abu Bakr is a soft-hearted man and he would be overpowered by his weeping if he recited the Quran. He said to them, tell him, Abu Bakr, to lead the prayer. The same reply was given to him. He said again, tell him to lead the prayer. You, women, are the companions of Joseph. 77, narrated Hisham ibn Urwa's father, Aisha said, Allah's messenger ordered Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer during his illness and so he led them in prayer. Urwa, a sub-narrator, added, Allah's messenger felt a bit relieved and came out and Abu Bakr was leading the people. When Abu Bakr saw the Prophet, he retreated but the Prophet beckoned him to remain there. Allah's messenger sat beside Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr was following the prayer of Allah's messenger, and the people were following the prayer of Abu Bakr. 78, narrated Sal bin Sa'd as-Sa'di, Allah's messenger went to establish peace among Bani Amr bin Auf. In the meantime the time of prayer was due and the Mu'adhin went to Abu Bakr and said, will you lead the prayer, so that I may pronounce the Iqamah? Abu Bakr replied in the affirmative and led the prayer. Allah's messenger came while the people were still praying and he entered the rows of the praying people till he stood in the first row. The people clapped their hands. Abu Bakr never glanced sideways in his prayer but when the people continued clapping, Abu Bakr looked and saw Allah's messenger. Allah's messenger beckoned him to stay at his place. Abu Bakr raised his hands and thanked Allah for that order of Allah's messenger, and then he retreated till he reached the first row. Allah's messenger went forward and led the prayer. When Allah's messenger finished the prayer, he said, O Abu Bakr, what prevented you from staying when I ordered you to do so? Abu Bakr replied, how can Ibn Abi Quafa, Abu Bakr, dare to lead the prayer in the presence of Allah's messenger? Then Allah's messenger said, why did you clap so much? If something happens to anyone during his prayer he should say Subhan Allah. If he says so he will be attended to, for clapping is for women. 79, narrated Malik bin Huwairith, we went to the Prophet, and we were all young men and stayed with him for about 20 nights. The Prophet was very merciful. He said, "When you return home, impart religious teachings to your families and tell them to offer perfectly such and such a prayer at such and such a time and such a prayer at such and such a time. And at the time of the prayer one of you should pronounce the Adhaan and the oldest of you should lead the prayer." 80, narrated Itban bin Malik al-Ansari, the Prophet, came to my house and asked permission for entering and I allowed him. He asked, "Where do you like me to pray in your house?" I pointed to a place which I liked. He stood up for prayer and we aligned behind him and he finished the prayer with taslim and we did the same. 81, narrated Ubaydullah ibn Abdullah bin Utbah, I went to Aisha and asked her to describe to me the illness of Allah's Messenger. Aisha said, "Yes." The Prophet became seriously ill and asked whether the people had prayed. We replied, "No. O Allah's Apostle! They are waiting for you." He added, "Put water for me in a trough." Aisha added, "We did so." He took a bath and tried to get up but fainted. When he recovered, he again asked whether the people had prayed. We said, "No, they are waiting for you." "O Allah's Messenger," he again said, "Put water in a trough for me." He sat down and took a bath and tried to get up but fainted again. Then he recovered and said, "Have the people prayed?" We replied, "No, they are waiting for you. O Allah's Apostle." He said, "Put water for me in the trough." Then he sat down and washed himself and tried to get up but he fainted. When he recovered, he asked, "Have the people prayed?" We said, "No, they are waiting for you. O Allah's Messenger." The people were in the mosque waiting for the Prophet, for the Isha prayer. The Prophet sent for Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. The messenger went to Abu Bakr and said, "Allah's Messenger orders you to lead the people in the prayer." Abu Bakr was a soft-hearted man, so he asked Umar to lead the prayer but Umar replied, "You are more rightful." So Abu Bakr led the prayer in those days. When the Prophet felt a bit better, he came out for the Zuhr prayer with the help of 2 persons, one of whom was Al-Abbas, while Abu Bakr was leading the people in the prayer. When Abu Bakr saw him he wanted to retreat but the Prophet beckoned him not to do so and asked them to make him sit beside Abu Bakr and they did so. Abu Bakr was following the Prophet in the prayer, and the people were following Abu Bakr. The Prophet prayed, sitting. Ubaydullah added, I went to Abdullah bin Abbas and asked him, "Shall I tell you what Aisha has told me about the fatal illness of the Prophet?" Ibn Abbas said, "Go ahead." I told him her narration and he did not deny anything of it but asked whether Aisha told me the name of the second person, who helped the Prophet, along with Al-Abbas. I said, "No," he said, "he was Ali, ibn Abi Talib." 82, narrated Aisha, the mother of the believers, Allah's Messenger, during his illness prayed at his house while sitting whereas some people prayed behind him standing. The Prophet beckoned them to sit down. On completion of the prayer, he said, "The Imam is to be followed, bow when he bows, raise up your heads, stand erect, when he raises his head and when he says, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, Allah heard those who sent praises to him, say then, Rabbana wa laka alhamd, O our Lord. All the praises are for you, and if he prays sitting then pray sitting." 83, narrated Anas bin Malik, once Allah's Messenger rode a horse and fell down and the right side of his body was injured. He offered one of the prayers while sitting and we also prayed behind him sitting. When he completed the prayer, he said, "The Imam is to be followed. Pray standing if he prays standing and bow when he bows, rise when he rises, and if he says, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, say then, Rabbana wa laka alhamd and pray standing if he prays standing and pray sitting, all of you, if he prays sitting." Humayd said, the saying of the Prophet, "Pray sitting, if he, Imam, prays sitting," was said in his former illness, during his early life, but the Prophet prayed sitting afterwards, in the last illness, and the people were praying standing behind him and the Prophet did not order them to sit. We should follow the latest actions of the Prophet. 84, narrated Albara sad face and he was not a liar, when Allah's messenger, said, Samia Allahu liman hamidah, none of us bent his back, for prostration, till the Prophet, prostrated and then we would prostrate after him. 85, narrated Abu Ishaq as above. 86, narrated Abu Huraira, the Prophet, said, Isn't he who raises his head before the Imam afraid that Allah may transform his head into that of a donkey or his face, into that of a donkey? 87, narrated Ibn Umar when the earliest emigrants came to Al-Usba, a place in Kuba, before the arrival of the Prophet, Salim, the slave of Abu Hudhaifa, who knew the Quran more than the others, used to lead them in prayer. 88, narrated Anas, the Prophet, said, Listen and obey, your chief, even if an Ethiopian whose head is like a raisin were made your chief. 89, narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's messenger, said, If the Imam leads the prayer correctly then he and you will receive the rewards, but if he makes a mistake, in the prayer, then you will receive the reward for the prayer and the sin will be his. 90, narrated Ubaydullah bin Adi bin Qiyar, I went to Uthman bin Affan while he was besieged, and said to him, You are the chief of all Muslims in general and you see what has befallen you. We are led in the Salat, prayer, by a leader of al-Fitan, trials and afflictions etc., and we are afraid of being sinful in following him. Uthman said, As Salat, the prayers, is the best of all deeds, so when the people do good deeds do the same with them, and when they do bad deeds, avoid those bad deeds. Az-Zuri said, In our opinion one should not offer Salat behind an effeminate person unless there is no alternative. 91, narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet, said to Abu Dhar, Listen and obey, your chief, even if he is an Ethiopian with a head like a raisin. 92, narrated Ibn Abbas, Once I passed the night in the house of my aunt Maymunah. Allah's messenger, offered the Isha, prayer and then came to the house and offered 4 rakat and slept. Later on, he woke up and stood for the prayer and I stood on his left side. He drew me to his right and prayed 5 rakat and then 2. He then slept till I heard him snoring, or heard his breath sounds. Afterwards he went out for the morning prayer. 93, narrated Ibn Abbas, One night I slept at the house of my aunt, Maymunah, and the Prophet was there on that night. He performed ablution and stood up for the prayer. I joined him and stood on his left side, but he drew me to his right and prayed 13 rakat and then slept till I heard his breath sounds. And whenever he slept, he used to breathe with audible sounds. The Mu'adhin came to the Prophet, and he went out and prayed the morning prayer, without repeating the ablution. 94, narrated Ibn Abbas, Once I passed the night in the house of my aunt Maymunah. The Prophet stood for the night prayer and I joined him and stood on his left side, but he drew me to his right by holding me by the head. 95, narrated Muad bin Jabal, I used to pray the Isha prayer with the Prophet, and then go to lead my people in the prayer. 96, narrated Amr, Jabir bin Abdullah said, Muad bin Jabal used to pray with the Prophet, and then go to lead his people in prayer. Once he led the Isha prayer and recited Surat al-Baqarah. Somebody left the prayer and Muad criticized him. The news reached the Prophet, and he said to Muad, You are putting the people to trial, and repeated it thrice, or said something similar, and ordered him to recite 2 medium surahs of Mufassal. Amr said that he had forgotten the names of those surahs. 97, narrated Abu Masud, a man came and said, O Allah's messenger, by Allah, I keep away from the morning prayer only because so and so prolongs the prayer when he leads us in it. The narrator said, I never saw Allah's apostle more furious in giving advice than he was at that time. He then said, Some of you make people dislike good deeds, the prayer. So whoever among you leads the people in prayer should shorten it, because among them are the weak, the old and the needy. 98, narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's messenger, said, If any one of you leads the people in the prayer, he should shorten it, for amongst them are the weak, the sick and the old, and if anyone among you prays alone then he may prolong the prayer, as much as he wishes. 99, narrated Abu Masud, a man came and said, O Allah's messenger, I keep away from the morning prayer because so and so, Imam, prolongs it too much. Allah's messenger became furious, and I had never seen him more furious than he was on that day. The Prophet said, O people! Some of you make others dislike the prayer, so whoever becomes an imam he should shorten the prayer, as behind him are the weak, the old and the needy. 100. Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari. Once a man was driving two nadihas, camels used for agricultural purposes, and night had fallen. He found Muad praying, so he made his camel kneel and joined Muad in the prayer. The latter recited Surat al-Baqarah or Surat an-Nisa, so the man left the prayer and went away. When he came to know that Muad had criticized him, he went to the Prophet and complained against Muad. The Prophet said thrice, O Muad! Are you putting the people to trial? It would have been better if you had recited Sabi Isma Rabbika Ilala, 87, Wash Shamsi Wadaha, 91, or Walaili Ida Yasha, 92, for the old, the weak and the needy pray behind you. Jabir said that Muad recited Surah al-Baqarah in the Isha prayer. 101. Narrated Anas, the Prophet used to pray a short prayer in congregation, but used to offer it in a perfect manner. 102. Narrated Abdullah bin Abi Qatada, my father said, the Prophet said, when I stand for prayer, I intend to prolong it, but on hearing the cries of a child, I cut it short, as I dislike to trouble the child's mother. 103. Narrated Anas bin Malik. I never prayed behind any imam a prayer lighter and more perfect than that behind the Prophet, and he used to cut short the prayer whenever he heard the cries of a child, lest he should put the child's mother to trial. 104. Narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said, when I start the prayer I intend to prolong it, but on hearing the cries of a child, I cut short the prayer because I know that the cries of the child will incite its mother's passions. 105. Narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said, whenever I start the prayer I intend to prolong it, but on hearing the cries of a child, I cut short the prayer because I know that the cries of the child will incite its mother's passions. 106. Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah. Muad used to pray with the Prophet, and then go and lead his people, tribe, in the prayer. 107. Narrated Aisha. When the Prophet became ill in his fatal illness, someone came to inform him about the prayer, and the Prophet told him to tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. I said, Abu Bakr is a soft-hearted man, and if he stands for the prayer in your place, he would weep and would not be able to recite the Quran. The Prophet said, tell Abu Bakr to lead the prayer. I said the same as before. He repeated the same order, and, on the third or the fourth time he said, you are the companions of Joseph. Tell Abu Bakr to lead the prayer. So Abu Bakr led the prayer, and meanwhile the Prophet felt better and came out with the help of two men, as if I see him just now dragging his feet on the ground. When Abu Bakr saw him, he tried to retreat, but the Prophet beckoned him to carry on. Abu Bakr retreated a bit and the Prophet sat on his left side. Abu Bakr was repeating the takbir, Allahu Akbar, of Allah's Messenger, for the people to hear. 108. Narrated Aisha. When Allah's Messenger became seriously ill, Bilal came to him for the prayer. He said, tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. I said, O Allah's Messenger! Abu Bakr is a soft-hearted man, and if he stands in your place, he would not be able to make the people hear him. Will you order Umar to lead the prayer? The Prophet said, tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. Then I said to Hafsa, tell him, Abu Bakr is a soft-hearted man, and if he stands in his place, he would not be able to make the people hear him. Would you order Umar to lead the prayer? Hafsa did so. The Prophet said, verily you are the companions of Joseph. Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. So Abu Bakr stood for the prayer. In the meantime Allah's Messenger felt better and came out with the help of two persons, and both of his legs were dragging on the ground till he entered the mosque. When Abu Bakr heard him coming, he tried to retreat, but Allah's Messenger beckoned him to carry on. The Prophet sat on his left side. Abu Bakr was praying while standing, and Allah's Messenger was leading the prayer while sitting. Abu Bakr was following the Prophet, and the people were following Abu Bakr, in the prayer. 109, narrated Abu Huraira. Once Allah's Messenger prayed 2 rakat, instead of 4, and finished his prayer. Dhulyadain asked him whether the prayer had been reduced or whether he had forgotten. Allah's Messenger asked the people whether Dhulyadain was telling the truth. The people replied in the affirmative. Then Allah's Apostle stood up, offered the remaining 2 rakat and then finished his prayer with taslim and then said, Allahu Akbar. He followed it with 2 prostrations like ordinary prostrations or a bit longer. 110, narrated Abu Huraira. The Prophet prayed 2 rakat of Zuhr prayer, instead of 4, and he was told that he had prayed 2 rakat only. Then he prayed 2 more rakat and finished them with the taslim followed by 2 prostrations. 111, narrated Aisha, the mother of the faithful believers, Allah's Messenger, in his last illness said, Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. I said, if Abu Bakr stood in your place, he would not be able to make the people hear him owing to his weeping. So please order Umar to lead the prayer. He said, Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. I said to Hafsa, Say to him, Abu Bakr is a soft-hearted man and if he stood in your place he would not be able to make the people hear him owing to his weeping. So order Umar to lead the people in the prayer. Hafsa did so but Allah's Messenger said, Keep quiet. Verily you are the companions of Prophet Joseph. Tell Abu Bakr to lead the people in the prayer. Hafsa said to me, I never got any good from you. 112, narrated Nu'man bin Bashir, the Prophet said, Straighten your rows or Allah will alter your faces. 113, narrated Anas, the Prophet said, Straighten your rows, for I see you from behind my back. 114, narrated Anas bin Malik. Once the Iqama was pronounced and Allah's Messenger faced us and said, Straighten your rows and stand closer together, for I see you from behind my back. 115, narrated Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, Martyrs are those who die because of drowning, plague, an abdominal disease, or of being buried alive by a falling building. And then he added, if the people knew the reward for the Zuhr prayer in its early time, they would race for it. If they knew the reward for the Isha and the Far prayers in congregation, they would join them even if they had to crawl. If they knew the reward for the first row, they would draw lots for it. 116, narrated Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, The Imam is appointed to be followed. So do not differ from him, bow when he bows, and say, Rabbana lakal hamd, if he says, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, and if he prostrates, prostrate, after him, and if he prays sitting, pray sitting altogether, and straighten the rows for the prayer, as the straightening of the rows is amongst those things which make your prayer a correct and perfect one. See Hadith No. 117, narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said, Straighten your rows as the straightening of rows is essential for a perfect and correct prayer. 118, narrated Anas bin Malik. I arrived at Medina and was asked whether I found any change since the days of Allah's Messenger. I said, I have not found any change except that you do not stand in alignment in your prayers. 119, narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said, Straighten your rows for I see you from behind my back. Anas added, Every one of us used to put his shoulder with the shoulder of his companion and his foot with the foot of his companion. 120, narrated Ibn Abbas. I prayed with the Prophet one night and stood on his left side. Allah's Messenger caught hold of my head from behind and drew me to his right and then offered the prayer and slept. Later the Mu'adhdhin came and the Prophet stood up for prayer without performing ablution. 121, narrated Anas bin Malik. One night an orphan and I offered the prayers behind the Prophet, in my house and my mother, Sulaim, was standing behind us, by herself forming a row. 122, narrated Ibn Abbas. One night I stood to the left of the Prophet, in the prayer but he caught hold of me by the hand or by the shoulder, arm, till he made me stand on his right and beckoned with his hand, for me, to go from behind him. Al-Kashmihani, Fath al-Bari. 123, narrated Aisha, Allah's Messenger used to pray in his room at night. As the wall of the room was low, the people saw him and some of them stood up to follow him in the prayer. In the morning they spread the news. The following night the prophet stood for the prayer and the people followed him. This went on for 2 or 3 nights. Thereupon Allah's messenger did not stand for the prayer the following night, and did not come out. In the morning, the people asked him about it. He replied, that he was afraid that the night prayer might become compulsory. 124, narrated Aisha, the Prophet had a mat which he used to spread during the day and use as a curtain at night. So a number of people gathered at night facing it and prayed behind him. 125, narrated Zayd bin Thabit, Allah's messenger, made a small room in the month of Ramadan, said, I think that Zayd bin Thabit said that it was made of a mat, and he prayed there for a few nights, and so some of his companions prayed behind him. When he came to know about it, he kept on sitting. In the morning, he went out to them and said, I have seen and understood what you did. You should pray in your houses, for the best prayer of a person is that which he prays in his house except the compulsory prayers. 126, narrated Anas bin Malik al-Ansari, Allah's messenger, rode a horse and fell down and the right side of his body was injured. On that day he prayed one of the prayers sitting and we also prayed behind him sitting. When the Prophet finished the prayer with taslim, he said, the Imam is to be followed and if he prays standing then pray standing, and bow when he bows, and raise your heads when he raises his head, prostrate when he prostrates, and if he says, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, you should say, Rabbana wa laka alhamd, 127, narrated Anas bin Malik, Allah's messenger, fell from a horse and got injured so he led the prayer sitting and we also prayed sitting. When he completed the prayer he said, the Imam is to be followed, if he says takbir then say takbir, bow if he bows, raise your heads when he raises his head, when he says, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida say, Rabbana laka alhamd, and prostrate when he prostrates. 128, narrated Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, the Imam is to be followed. Say the takbir when he says it, bow if he bows, if he says, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, say, Rabbana wa laka alhamd, prostrate if he prostrates and pray sitting altogether if he prays sitting. 129, narrated Salim bin Abdullah, my father said, Allah's messenger used to raise both his hands up to the level of his shoulders when opening the prayer, and on saying the takbir for bowing. And on raising his head from bowing he used to do the same and then say, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana wa laka alhamd. And he did not do that, i.e. raising his hands, in prostrations. 130, narrated Abdullah bin Umar, I saw that whenever Allah's messenger stood for the prayer, he used to raise both his hands up to the shoulders, and used to do the same on saying the takbir for bowing and on raising his head from it and used to say, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida. But he did not do that, i.e. raising his hands, in prostrations. 131, narrated Abu Kalaba, I saw Malik bin Huwairith saying takbir and raising both his hands, on starting the prayers and raising his hands on bowing and also on raising his head after bowing. Malik bin Huwairith said, Allah's messenger did the same. 132, narrated Abdullah bin Umar, I saw Allah's messenger opening the prayer with the takbir and raising his hands to the level of his shoulders at the time of saying the takbir, and on saying the takbir for bowing he did the same, and when he said, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, he did the same and then said, Rabbana wa laka alhamd. But he did not do the same on prostrating and on lifting the head from it. 133, narrated Nafi, whenever Ibn Umar started the prayer with takbir, he used to raise his hands, whenever he bowed, he used to raise his hands, before bowing, and also used to raise his hands on saying, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, and he used to do the same on rising from the second rak'ah, for the third rak'ah. Ibn Umar said, the Prophet used to do the same. 134, narrated Sal bin Sa'd, the people were ordered to place the right hand on the left forearm in the prayer. Abu Hazim said, I knew that the order was from the Prophet. 135, narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's messenger, said, you see me facing the Qibla, but, by Allah, nothing is hidden from me regarding your bowing and submissiveness and I see you from behind my back. 136, narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet, said, perform the bowing and the prostrations properly. By Allah, I see you from behind me, or from behind my back, when you bow or prostrate. 137, narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet, Abu Bakr and Umar used to start the prayer with, Alhamdulillahi Rabbi al-Alamin, all praise is but to Allah, Lord of the worlds. 138, narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger, used to keep silent between the takbir and the recitation of Quran, and that interval of silence used to be a short one. I said to the Prophet, may my parents be sacrificed for you. What do you say in the pause between takbir and recitation? The Prophet said, I say, Allahumma, baid baini wa baina kataya kama badtata baina el mashriki wa el maghrib. Allahumma, nakini min kataya kama yunaka th thabu elabayadu mina didanas. Allahumma, isal kataya by el masai wa th thalji wa el barad, O Allah. Set me apart from my sins, faults, as the east and west are set apart from each other, and clean me from sins as a white garment is cleaned of dirt, after thorough washing. O Allah! Wash off my sins with water, snow and hail. 139, narrated Asma bint Abi Bakr, the Prophet, once offered the eclipse prayer. He stood for a long time and then did a prolonged bowing. He stood up straight again and kept on standing for a long time, then bowed a long bowing and then stood up straight and then prostrated a prolonged prostration and then lifted his head and prostrated a prolonged prostration. And then he stood up for a long time and then did a prolonged bowing and then stood up straight again and kept on standing for a long time. Then he bowed a long bowing and then stood up straight and then prostrated a prolonged prostration and then lifted his head and went for a prolonged prostration. On completion of the prayer, he said, Paradise became as near to me that if I had dared, I would have plucked one of its bunches for you, and hell became so near to me that said, O my Lord, will I be among those people? Then suddenly I saw a woman and a cat was lacerating her with its claws. On inquiring, it was said that the woman had imprisoned the cat till it died of starvation, and she neither fed it nor freed it so that it could feed itself. 140, narrated Abu Mamr, we asked Kababab whether Allah's Messenger used to recite the Quran in the Zuhr and the Asr prayers. He replied in the affirmative. We said, how did you come to know about it? He said, by the movement of his beard. 141, narrated Al-Bara sad face, and Al-Bara was not a liar. Whenever we offered prayer with the Prophet, and he raised his head from the bowing, we used to remain standing till we saw him prostrating. 142, narrated Abdullah bin Abbas, once solar eclipse occurred during the lifetime of Allah's Messenger. He offered the eclipse prayer. His companions asked, O Allah's Messenger, we saw you trying to take something while standing at your place, and then we saw you retreating. The Prophet said, I was shown paradise and wanted to have a bunch of fruit from it. Had I taken it, you would have eaten from it as long as the world remains. 143, narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet, led us in prayer and then went up to the pulpit and beckoned with both hands towards the Qibla of the mosque, and then said, when I started leading you in prayer, I saw the display of paradise and hell on the wall of the mosque, facing the Qibla. I never saw good and bad as I have seen today. He repeated the last statement thrice. 144, narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet, said, what is wrong with those people who look towards the sky during the prayer? His talk grew stern while delivering this speech, and he said, they should stop looking towards the sky during the prayer, otherwise their eyesight would be taken away. 145, narrated Aisha, I asked Allah's Messenger about looking hither and thither in prayer. He replied, it is a way of stealing by which Satan takes away a portion from the prayer of a person. 146, narrated Aisha, once the Prophet prayed on a camisa with marks on it and said, the marks on it diverted my attention, take this camisa to Abu Jam and bring an inbijania from him. 147, narrated Ibn Umar, the Prophet, saw expectoration in the direction of the Qibla of the mosque while he was leading the prayer, and scratched it off. After finishing the prayer, he said, whenever any of you is in prayer he should know that Allah is in front of him. so none should spit in front of him in the prayer. 148, narrated Anas. While the Muslims were offering the far prayer, Allah's Messenger suddenly appeared before them by lifting the curtain of the dwelling place of Aisha, looked towards the Muslims who were standing in rows. He smiled with pleasure. Abu Bakr started retreating to join the row on the assumption that the Prophet wanted to come out for the prayer. The Muslims intended to leave the prayer, and were on the verge of being put to trial, but the Prophet beckoned them to complete their prayer, and then he let the curtain fall. He died in the last hours of that day. 149, narrated Jabir bin Samura. The people of Kufa complained against Sa'd to Umar, and the latter dismissed him and appointed Ammar as their chief. They lodged many complaints against Sa'd, and even they alleged that he did not pray properly. Umar sent for him and said, "O Aba Ishaq, these people claim that you do not pray properly." Abu Ishaq said, "By Allah, I used to pray with them a prayer similar to that of Allah's apostle, and I never reduced anything of it. I used to prolong the first 2 rakat of Isha prayer and shorten the last 2 rakat." Umar said, "O Aba Ishaq, this was what I thought about you." And then he sent 1 or more persons with him to Kufa so as to ask the people about him. So they went there and did not leave any mosque without asking about him. All the people praised him till they came to the mosque of the tribe of Bani Abs. One of the men called Usama bin Qatada with a surname of Aba Sada stood up and said, "As you have put us under an oath, I am bound to tell you that Sa'd never went himself with the army and never distributed the war booty equally and never did justice in legal verdicts." On hearing it, Sa'd said, "I pray to Allah for 3 things, O Allah. If this slave of yours is a liar and got up for showing off, give him a long life, increase his poverty and put him to trials." And so it happened. Later on, when that person was asked how he was, he used to reply that he was an old man in trial as the result of Sa'd's curse. Abdul Malik, the sub-narrator, said that he had seen him afterwards and his eyebrows were overhanging his eyes owing to old age, and he used to tease and assault the small girls in the way. 150, narrated Ubadah bin As-Samit. Allah's Messenger said, "Whoever does not recite Al-Fatiha in his prayer is invalid." 151, narrated Abu Huraira. Allah's Messenger entered the mosque and a person followed him. The man prayed and went to the Prophet and greeted him. The Prophet returned the greeting and said to him, "Go back and pray, for you have not prayed." The man went back, prayed in the same way as before, returned and greeted the Prophet, who said, "Go back and pray, for you have not prayed." This happened thrice. The man said, "By him who sent you with the truth, I cannot offer the prayer in a better way than this. Please, teach me how to pray." The Prophet said, "When you stand for prayer, say Takbir and then recite from the Holy Quran, of what you know by heart, and then bow till you feel at ease. Then raise your head and stand up straight, then prostrate till you feel at ease during your prostration, then sit with calmness till you feel at ease, do not hurry, and do the same in all your prayers." 152, narrated Jabir bin Samura. Sa'd said, "I used to pray with them a prayer similar to that of Allah's Messenger, the prayer of Zuhr and Asr, reducing nothing from them. I used to prolong the first 2 rakat and shorten the last 2 rakat." Umar said to Sa'd, "This was what we thought about you." 153, narrated Abdullah bin Abi Qatada. My father said, "The Prophet, in Zuhr prayers, used to recite Al-Fatiha along with 2 other surahs in the first 2 rakat, a long one in the first rakah and a shorter surah in the second, and at times the verses were audible. In the Asr prayer the Prophet used to recite Al-Fatiha and 2 more surahs in the first 2 rakat and used to prolong the first rakah. And he used to prolong the first rakah of the far prayer and shorten the second." 154, narrated Abu Mamr. I asked Kababab whether the Prophet used to recite the Quran in the Zuhr and the Asr prayers. He replied in the affirmative. We said, "How did you come to know that?" He said, "From the movement of his beard." 155, narrated Abu Mamr. I asked Kababab bin Al-Art whether the Prophet used to recite the Quran in the Zuhr and the Asr prayers. He replied in the affirmative. I said, "How did you come to know that?" He replied, from the movement of his beard. 156, narrated Abdullah bin Abi Qatada, my father said, the Prophet used to recite al-Fatiha along with another surah in the first two rakat of the Zuhr and the Asr prayers, and at times a verse or so was audible to us. 157, narrated Ibn Abbas, sad face my mother. al-Fadl heard me reciting while Mursalati Irfan, 77, and said, O my son! By Allah, your recitation made me remember that it was the last surah I heard from Allah's Messenger. He recited it in the Maghrib prayer. 158, narrated Marwan bin al-Hakam, Zayd bin Thabit said to me, why do you recite very short surahs in the Maghrib prayer while I heard the Prophet reciting the longer of the two long surahs? 159, narrated Jubair bin Mut'im, my father said, I heard Allah's Messenger reciting At-Tur 52 in the Maghrib prayer. 160, narrated Abu Rafi, I offered the Isha prayer behind Abu Huraira and he recited Ida Asamayu Enshakat 84 and prostrated. On my inquiring, he said, I prostrated behind Abul Qasim, the Prophet, when he recited that surah, and I will go on doing it till I meet him. 161, narrated Al-Bara, the Prophet was on a journey and recited in one of the first two rakat of the Isha prayer, Watitini Wazizaitan. 162, narrated Abu Rafi, once I prayed the Isha prayer with Abu Huraira and he recited Ida Asamayu Enshakat 84 and prostrated. I said, what is that? He said, I prostrated behind Abul Qasim, the Prophet, when he recited that surah, and I will go on doing it till I meet him. 163, narrated Al-Bara, I heard the Prophet reciting Watitini Wazizaitan 95 in the Isha prayer, and I never heard a sweeter voice or a better way of recitation than that of the Prophet. 164, narrated Jabir bin Samura, Umar said to Sa'd, the people complained against you in everything, even in prayer. Sa'd replied, really I used to prolong the first two rakat and shorten the last two, and I will never shorten the prayer in which I follow Allah's Messenger. Umar said, you are telling the truth and that is what I think about you. 165, narrated Siyar bin Salama, my father and I went to Abu Barza al-Islami to ask him about the stated times for the prayers. He replied, the Prophet used to offer the Zuhr prayer when the sun just declined from its highest position at noon, the Asr at a time when if a man went to the farthest place in Medina, after praying, he would find the sun still hot, bright. The sub-narrator said, I have forgotten what Abu Barza said about the Maghrib prayer. The Prophet never found any harm in delaying the Isha prayer to the first third of the night, and he never liked to sleep before it and to talk after it. He used to offer the morning prayer at a time when after finishing it one could recognize the person sitting beside him, and used to recite between 60 to 100 verses in one or both the rakat. 166, narrated Abu Huraira, the Quran is recited in every prayer, and in those prayers in which Allah's Messenger recited aloud for us, we recite aloud in the same prayers for you, and the prayers in which the Prophet recited quietly, we recite quietly. If you recite al-Fatiha only it is sufficient, but if you recite something else in addition, it is better. 167, narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet set out with the intention of going to Suq Uqais, market of Uqais, along with some of his companions. At the same time, a barrier was put between the devils and the news of heaven. Fire commenced to be thrown at them. The devils went to their people, who asked them, what is wrong with you? They said, a barrier has been placed between us and the news of heaven. And fire has been thrown at us. They said, the thing which has put a barrier between you and the news of heaven must be something which has happened recently. Go eastward and westward and see what has put a barrier between you and the news of heaven. Those who went towards Tahama came across the Prophet at a place called Nakhla, and it was on the way to Suq Uqais, and the Prophet was offering the far prayer with his companions. When they heard the Quran they listened to it and said, by Allah, this is the thing which has put a barrier between us and the news of heaven. They went to their people and said, O our people, verily we have heard a wonderful recital, Quran, which shows the true path, we believed in it and would not ascribe partners to our Lord. Allah revealed the following verses to his prophet, Surah Jinn, 72, say, "It has been revealed to me." And what was revealed to him was the conversation of the jinns. 168, narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet, recited aloud in the prayers in which he was ordered to do so and quietly in the prayers in which he was ordered to do so. And your Lord is not forgetful. Verily there was a good example for you in the ways of the Prophet. 169, Anna said, one of the Ansar used to lead the Ansar in Salat in the Quba mosque, and it was his habit to recite Qul Huwallahu Ahad whenever he wanted to recite something in Salat. When he finished that surah, he would recite another one with it. He followed the same procedure in each rak'ah. His companions discussed this with him and said, "You recite this surah and do not consider it sufficient, and then you recite another. So would you recite it alone or leave it and recite some other?" He said, "I will never leave it, and if you want me to be your imam on this condition then it is all right, otherwise I will leave you." They knew that he was the best amongst them and they did not like someone else to lead them in Salat. When the Prophet went to them as usual, they informed him about it. The Prophet addressed him and said, "O so-and-so, what forbids you from doing what your companions ask you to do? Why do you read this surah particularly in every rak'ah?" He replied, "I love this surah." The Prophet said, "Your love for this surah will make you enter paradise." 170, narrated Abu Wa'il, a man came to Ibn Masud and said, "I recited the Mufassal surahs at night in one rak'ah." Ibn Masud said, "This recitation is too quick, like the recitation of poetry. I know the identical surahs which the Prophet used to recite in pairs." Ibn Masud then mentioned 20 Mufassal surahs, including 2 surahs from the family of, i.e. those verses which begin with Ha, Mim, which the Prophet used to recite in each rak'ah. 171, narrated Abdullah bin Abi Qatada, my father said, the Prophet uses to recite Al-Fatiha followed by another surah in the first 2 rak'at of the prayer and used to recite only Al-Fatiha in the last 2 rak'at of the Zuhr prayer. Sometimes a verse or so was audible and he used to prolong the first rak'ah more than the second and used to do the same in the Asr and Far prayers. 172, narrated Abu Mamr, we said to Kababab, did Allah's Messenger used to recite in Zuhr and Asr prayers? He replied in the affirmative. We said, how did you come to know about it? He said, by the movement of his beard. 173, narrated Abdullah bin Abi Qatada, my father said, the Prophet used to recite Al-Fatiha along with another surah in the first 2 rak'at of the Zuhr and Asr prayers. A verse or so was audible at times and he used to prolong the first rak'ah. 174, narrated Abdullah bin Abi Qatada, my father said, the Prophet used to prolong the first rak'ah of the Zuhr prayer and shorten the second one and used to do the same in the Far prayer. 175, narrated Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, say Ameen when the Imam says it, and if the Ameen of any one of you coincides with that of the angels then all his past sins will be forgiven. Ibn Shihab said, Allah's Messenger used to say, Ameen. 176, narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger said, if any one of you says, Ameen, and the angels in the heaven say, Ameen, and the former coincides with the latter, all his past sins will be forgiven. 177, narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger said, say Amen when the Imam says, Gari el-Maghdubi alayhim waladidalin, not the path of those who earn your anger, such as Jews, nor of those who go astray, such as Christians, all the past sins of the person whose saying, of Ameen, coincides with that of the angels, will be forgiven. 178, narrated Abu Bakr, I reached the Prophet in the mosque while he was bowing in prayer and I too bowed before joining the row, mentioned it to the Prophet, and he said to me, may Allah increase your love for the good. But do not repeat it again, bowing in that way. 179, narrated Imran bin Hussein, I offered the prayer with Ali in Basra and he made us remember the prayer which we used to pray with Allah's Messenger. Ali said takbir on each rising and bowing. 180, narrated Abu Salama, when Abu Huraira led us in prayer he used to say takbir on each bowing and rising. On the completion of the prayer he used to say, "My prayer is more similar to the prayer of Allah's Messenger, than that of any one of you." 181, narrated Mutarrif bin Abdullah, Imran bin Hussein and I offered the prayer behind Ali bin Abi Talib. When Ali prostrated, he said the takbir, when he raised his head, he said the takbir and when he got up for the third rak'ah he said the takbir. On completion of the prayer Imran took my hand and said, "This, i.e. Ali, made me remember the prayer of Muhammad," or he said, "He led us in a prayer like that of Muhammad." 182, narrated Ikrimah, I saw a person praying at Muqam Ibrahim, the place of Abraham by the Kaaba, and he was saying takbir on every bowing, rising, standing and sitting. I asked Ibn Abbas about this prayer. He admonished me saying, "Isn't that the prayer of the Prophet?" 183, narrated Ikrimah, I prayed behind a sheikh at Mecca and he said 22 takbirs, during the prayer. I told Ibn Abbas that he, i.e. that sheikh, was foolish. Ibn Abbas admonished me and said, "This is the tradition of Abul Qasim." 184, and narrated Abu Huraira, whenever Allah's Messenger stood for the prayer, he said takbir on starting the prayer and then on bowing. On rising from bowing he said, "Sami Allahu liman hamadah," and then while standing straight he used to say, "Rabbana laka al-hamd." Al-Layth said, "The Prophet said, Walaka al-hamd." He used to say takbir on prostrating and on raising his head from prostration, again he would say takbir on prostrating and raising his head. He would then do the same in the whole of the prayer till it was completed. On rising from the second rak'ah, after sitting for at-tahiyyat, he used to say takbir. 185, narrated Musab bin Sa'd, I offered prayer beside my father and approximated both my hands and placed them in between the knees. My father told me not to do so and said, "We used to do the same but we were forbidden, by the Prophet, to do it and were ordered to place the hands on the knees." 186, narrated Zaid bin Wahb, Hudhaifa saw a person who was not performing the bowing and prostration perfectly. He said to him, "You have not prayed and if you should die you would die on a religion other than that of Muhammad." 187, narrated Al-Bara, the bowing, the prostration, the sitting in between the two prostrations and the standing after the bowing of the Prophet, but not qiyam, standing in the prayer, and qu'ud, sitting in the prayer, used to be approximately equal, in duration. 188, narrated Abu Huraira, once the Prophet entered the mosque, a man came in, offered the prayer and greeted the Prophet. The Prophet returned his greeting and said to him, "Go back and pray again for you have not prayed." The man offered the prayer again, came back and greeted the Prophet. He said to him thrice, "Go back and pray again for you have not prayed." The man said, "By him who has sent you with the truth, I do not know a better way of praying. Kindly teach me how to pray." He said, "When you stand for the prayer, say takbir and then recite from the Quran what you know and then bow with calmness till you feel at ease, then rise from bowing till you stand straight. Afterwards prostrate calmly till you feel at ease and then raise your head, and sit with calmness till you feel at ease and then prostrate with calmness till you feel at ease in prostration and do the same in the whole of your prayer." 189, narrated Aisha, the Prophet used to say in his bowing and prostrations, "Subhanaka Allahumma Rabbana wa bihamdika, Allahumma gfir li," exalted, from unbecoming attributes, are you O Allah our Lord, and by your praise, do I exalt you. O Allah, forgive me. 190, narrated Abu Huraira, when the Prophet said, "Sami'a Allahu liman hamadah," Allah heard those who sent praises to him, he would say, "Rabbana wa laka al-hamd." On bowing and raising his head from it the Prophet used to say takbir. He also used to say takbir on rising after the two prostrations. See Hadith No. 191, narrated Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger, said, when the Imam says, "Sami'a Allahu liman hamadah," you should say, "Allahumma Rabbana laka al-hamd." And if the saying of any one of you coincides with that of the angels, all his past sins will be forgiven. 192, narrated Abu Salama, Abu Huraira said, "No doubt, my salat is similar to that of the Prophet. Abu Huraira used to recite Qunut after saying Sami Allahu liman hamida in the last rak'ah of the Zuhr, Isha and Far prayers. He would ask Allah's forgiveness for the true believers and curse the disbelievers. 193, narrated Anas, the Qunut, supplication before going down for prostration, used to be recited in the Maghrib and the Far prayers. 194, narrated Rifa bin Rafi az-Zuraki. One day we were praying behind the Prophet. When he raised his head from bowing, he said, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida. A man behind him said, Rabbana wa laka alhamdu, hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fihi, O our Lord. All the praises are for you, many good and blessed praises. When the Prophet completed the prayer, he asked, Who has said these words? The man replied, I. The Prophet said, I saw over 30 angels competing to write it first. Prophet rose, from bowing, and stood straight till all the vertebrae of his spinal column came to a natural position. 195, narrated Thabit, Anas used to demonstrate to us the prayer of the Prophet, and while demonstrating, he used to raise his head from bowing and stand so long that we would say that he had forgotten the prostration. 196, narrated Al-Bara, the bowing, the prostrations, the period of standing after bowing and the interval between the two prostrations of the Prophet, used to be equal in duration. 197, narrated Ayyub, Abu Kalaba said, Malik bin Huwairith used to demonstrate to us the prayer of the Prophet, at times other than that of the compulsory prayers. So, once, he stood up for prayer and performed a perfect qiyam, standing and reciting from the Holy Quran, and then bowed and performed bowing perfectly, then he raised his head and stood straight for a while. Abu Kalaba added, Malik bin Huwairith in that demonstration prayed like this sheikh of ours, Abu Yazid. Abu Yazid used to sit, for a while, on raising his head from the second prostration before getting up. 198, narrated Abu Bakr bin Abdur Rahman ibn Harith bin Hisham and Abu Salama bin Abdur Rahman, Abu Huraira used to say takbir in all the prayers, compulsory and optional in the month of Ramadan or other months. He used to say takbir on standing for prayer and on bowing, then he would say, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, and before prostrating he would say, Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Then he would say takbir on prostrating and on raising his head from the prostration, then another takbir on prostrating, for the second time, and on raising his head from the prostration. He also would say the takbir on standing from the second rak'ah. He used to do the same in every rak'ah till he completed the prayer. On completion of the prayer, he would say, By him in whose hands my soul is. No doubt my prayer is closer to that of Allah's Messenger than yours, and this was his prayer till he left this world. 199, and Abu Huraira said, when Allah's Messenger raised his head from bowing, he used to say, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana wa laka alhamd. He would invoke Allah for some people by naming them, O Allah. Save Al-Walid bin Al-Walid and Salama bin Hisham and Ayash bin Abi Rabia and the weak and the helpless people among the faithful believers, O Allah. Be hard on the tribe of Madar and let them suffer from famine years like that of the time of Joseph. In those days the eastern section of the tribe of Madar was against the Prophet. 200, narrated Anas bin Malik, Allah's Messenger, fell from a horse and the right side of his body was injured. We went to inquire about his health. Meanwhile it was time for the prayer and he led the prayer sitting and we also prayed while sitting. On completion of the prayer he said, the Imam is to be followed, say takbir when he says it, bow when he bows, rise when he rises and when he says, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, say, Rabbana wa laka alhamd, and prostrate if he prostrates. Sufyan narrated the same from Mamr. Ibn Jurayj said that the Prophet's, right leg had been injured. 201, narrated Abu Huraira, the people said, O Allah's Messenger, shall we see our Lord on the day of resurrection? He replied, Do you have any doubt in seeing the full moon on a clear, not cloudy, night? They replied, No, O Allah's Messenger. He said, Do you have any doubt in seeing the sun when there are no clouds? They replied in the negative. He said, You will see Allah, your Lord, in the same way. On the day of resurrection, people will be gathered and he will order the people to follow what they used to worship. So some of them will follow the sun, some will follow the moon, and some will follow other deities, and only this nation, Muslims, will be left with its hypocrites. Allah will come to them and say, I am your Lord. They will say, we shall stay in this place till our Lord comes to us, and when our Lord will come, we will recognize him. Then Allah will come to them again and say, I am your Lord. They will say, you are our Lord. Allah will call them, and as Sirat, a bridge, will be laid across hell, and I, Muhammad, shall be the first amongst the apostles to cross it with my followers. Nobody except the apostles will then be able to speak, and they will be saying then, O Allah, save us. O Allah, save us. There will be hooks like the thorns of Adhaan in hell. Have you seen the thorns of Adhaan? The people said, yes. He said, these hooks will be like the thorns of Adhaan. But nobody except Allah knows their greatness in size, and these will entangle the people according to their deeds. Some of them will fall and stay in hell forever, others will receive punishment, torn into small pieces, and will get out of hell, till when Allah intends mercy on whomever he likes amongst the people of hell, he will order the angels to take out of hell those who worship none but him alone. The angels will take them out by recognizing them from the traces of prostrations, for Allah has forbidden the hell fire to eat away those traces. So they will come out of the fire, it will eat away from the whole of the human body except the marks of the prostrations. At that time they will come out of the fire as mere skeletons. The water of life will be poured on them, and as a result they will grow like the seeds growing on the bank of flowing water. Then when Allah had finished from the judgments amongst his creations, one man will be left between hell and paradise, and he will be the last man from the people of hell to enter paradise. He will be facing hell, and will say, O Allah, turn my face from the fire, as its wind has dried me and its steam has burnt me. Allah will ask him, will you ask for anything more in case this favor is granted to you? He will say, no, by your honor, power. And he will give to his Lord, Allah, what he will of the pledges and the covenants. Allah will then turn his face from the fire. When he will face paradise and will see its charm, he will remain quiet as long as Allah will. He then will say, O my Lord, let me go to the gate of paradise. Allah will ask him, didn't you give pledges and make covenants, to the effect, that you would not ask for anything more than what you requested at first? He will say, O my Lord, do not make me the most wretched amongst your creatures. Allah will say, if this request is granted, will you then ask for anything else? He will say, no. By your power, I shall not ask for anything else. Then he will give to his Lord what he will of the pledges and the covenants. Allah will then let him go to the gate of paradise. On reaching then and seeing its life, charm, and pleasure, he will remain quiet as long as Allah wills, and then will say, O my Lord, let me enter paradise. Allah will say, may Allah be merciful unto you, O son of Adam. How treacherous you are! Haven't you made covenants and given pledges that you will not ask for anything more than what you have been given? He will say, O my Lord, do not make me the most wretched amongst your creatures. So Allah will laugh and allow him to enter paradise, and will ask him to request as much as he likes. He will do so till all his desires have been fulfilled. Then Allah will say, request more of such and such things. Allah will remind him, and when all his desires and wishes have been fulfilled, Allah will say, all this is granted to you and a similar amount besides. Abu Said al-Khudri said to Abu Huraira, Allah's Messenger, said, Allah said, that is for you and 10 times more like it. Abu Huraira said, I do not remember from Allah's Messenger, except his saying, all this is granted to you and a similar amount besides. Abu said, I heard him saying, that is for you and 10 times more the like of it. 202, narrated Abdullah bin Malik bin Buhaina, whenever the Prophet used to offer prayer, he used to keep arms away from the body, so that the whiteness of his armpits was visible. 203, narrated Abu Wail, Hud Haifa said, I saw a person not performing his bowing and prostrations perfectly. When he completed the prayer, I told him that he had not prayed. I think that Hud Haifa added, i.e. said to the man, had you died, you would have died on a tradition other than that of the Prophet, Muhammad. 204, narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet, was ordered, by Allah, to prostrate on 7 parts and not to tuck up the clothes or hair, while praying. Those parts are, the forehead, along with the tip of nose, both hands, both knees, and toes of both feet. 205, narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet, said, we have been ordered to prostrate on 7 bones and not to tuck up the clothes or hair. 206, narrated Al-Bara bin Azib Sadface he was not a liar, we used to pray behind the Prophet, and when he said, Sami'a Allahu liman hamida, none of us would bend his back, to go for prostration, till the Prophet had placed his forehead on the ground. 207, narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet, said, I have been ordered to prostrate on 7 bones i.e. on the forehead along with the tip of the nose and the Prophet pointed towards his nose, both hands, both knees and the toes of both feet and not to gather the clothes or the hair. 208, narrated Abu Salama, once I went to Abu, said al-Khudri and asked him, won't you come with us to the date palm trees to have a talk? So Abu said went out and I asked him, tell me what you heard from the Prophet, about the night of Qadr. Abu said replied, once Allah's Messenger, performed itikaf, seclusion, on the first 10 days of the month of Ramadan and we did the same with him. Gabriel came to him and said, the night you are looking for is ahead of you. So the Prophet performed the itikaf in the middle, 10 days of the month of Ramadan and we too performed itikaf with him. Gabriel came to him and said, the night which you are looking for is ahead of you. In the morning of the 20th of Ramadan the Prophet delivered a sermon saying, whoever has performed itikaf with me should continue it. I have been shown the night of Qadr, but have forgotten its date, but it is in the odd nights of the last 10 nights. I saw in my dream that I was prostrating in mud and water. In those days the roof of the mosque was made of branches of date palm trees. At that time the sky was clear and no cloud was visible, but suddenly a cloud came and it rained. The Prophet led us in the prayer and I saw the traces of mud on the forehead and on the nose of Allah's Messenger. So it was the confirmation of that dream. 209, narrated Sahl bin Sa'd, the people used to pray with the Prophet, tying their izars around their necks because of their small sizes and the women were directed that they should not raise their heads from the prostrations till the men had sat straight. 210, narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet, was ordered to prostrate on 7 bony parts and not to tuck up his clothes or hair. 211, narrated Ibn Abbas, the Prophet, said, I have been ordered to prostrate on 7 bones, and not to tuck up the hair or garment. 212, narrated Aisha, the Prophet, used to say frequently in his bowing and prostrations, Subhanaka Allahumma Rabbana wa bihamdika, Allahumma gfir li, exalted, from unbecoming attributes, are you O Allah our Lord, and by your praise, do I exalt you. O Allah! Forgive me. In this way, he was acting on what was explained to him in the Holy Quran. 213, narrated Abu Kilaba, once Malik bin Huwairith said to his friends, shall I show you how Allah's Messenger used to offer his prayers? And it was not the time for any of the compulsory congregational prayers. So he stood up, for the prayer, bowed and said the takbir, then he raised his head and remained standing for a while and then prostrated and raised his head for a while, sat up for a while. He prayed like our Sheikh Amr ibn Salama. Ayyub said, the latter used to do a thing which I did not see the people doing, i.e. he used to sit between the 3rd and the 4th rak'ah. Malik bin Huwairith said, we came to the Prophet, after embracing Islam, and stayed with him. He said to us, when you go back to your families, pray such and such a prayer at such and such a time, pray such and such a prayer at such and such a time, and when there is the time for the prayer then only of you should pronounce the Adhaan for the prayer and the oldest of you should lead the prayer. 214, narrated Al-Bara, the time taken by the Prophet, in prostrations, bowing, and the sitting interval between the 2 prostrations was about the same. 2:15, narrated Thibet, Anas said, I will leave no stone unturned in making you offer the prayer as I have seen the Prophet, making us offer it. Anas used to do a thing which I have not seen you doing. He used to stand after the bowing for such a long time that one would think that he had forgotten the prostrations, and he used to sit in between the prostrations so long that one would think that he had forgotten the second prostration. 2:16, narrated Anas bin Malik, the Prophet said, Be straight in the prostrations and none of you should put his forearms on the ground, in the prostration, like a dog. 2:17, narrated Malik bin Huwairith al-Laythi, I saw the Prophet praying and in the odd rocket, he used to sit for a moment before getting up. 2:18, narrated Ayyub Abu Kalaba said, Malik bin Huwairith came to us and led us in the prayer in this mosque of ours and said, I lead you in prayer but I do not want to offer the prayer but just to show you how Allah's apostle performed his prayers. I asked Abu Kalaba, how was the prayer of Malik bin Huwairith? He replied, like the prayer of this sheikh of ours, i.e. Amr bin Salima. That sheikh used to pronounce the takbir perfectly and when he raised his head from the second prostration he would sit for a while and then support himself on the ground and get up. 2:19, narrated Said bin al-Harith, Abu Said led us in the prayer and said the takbir aloud on arising from the prostration, and on prostrating, on rising again, and on getting up from the second rak'ah. Abu Said said, I saw the Prophet doing the same. 2:20, narrated Mutarif, Imran and I prayed behind Ali bin Abi Talib and he said takbir on prostrating, on rising and on getting up after the 2 rakat, i.e. after the second rak'ah. When the prayer was finished, Imran took me by the hand and said, He, Ali, has prayed the prayer of Muhammad, or said, He made us remember the prayer of Muhammad. 2:21, narrated Abdullah bin Abdullah, I saw Abdullah bin Umar crossing his legs while sitting in the prayer and I, a mere youngster in those days, did the same. Ibn Umar forbade me to do so, and said, the proper way is to keep the right foot propped up and bend the left in the prayer. I said questioningly, but you are doing so, crossing the legs. He said, my feet cannot bear my weight. 2:22, narrated Muhammad bin Amr bin Atta, I was sitting with some of the companions of Allah's Messenger, and we were discussing about the way of praying of the Prophet. Abu Humayd as-Saidi said, I remember the prayer of Allah's Messenger, better than any one of you. I saw him raising both his hands up to the level of the shoulders on saying the takbir, and on bowing he placed his hands on both knees and bent his back straight, then he stood up straight from bowing till all the vertebrae took their normal positions. In prostrations, he placed both his hands on the ground with the forearms away from the ground and away from his body, and his toes were facing the Qibla. On sitting in the second rak'ah he sat on his left foot and propped up the right one, and in the last rak'ah he pushed his left foot forward and kept the other foot propped up and sat over the buttocks. 2:23, narrated Abdullah bin Buhayna, sad face he was from the tribe of Uzd Shanu'ay, and was the ally of the tribe of Abdul Manaf and was one of the companions of the Prophet. Once the Prophet led us in the Zuhr prayer and stood up after the second rak'ah and did not sit down. The people stood up with him. When the prayer was about to end and the people were waiting for him to say the taslim, he said takbir while sitting and prostrated twice before saying the taslim and then he said the taslim. 2:24, narrated Abdullah bin Malik bin Buhayna, once Allah's Messenger led us in the Zuhr prayer and got up, after the prostrations of the second rak'ah, although he should have sat, for the tashahhud. So at the end of the prayer, he prostrated twice while sitting, prostrations of sahu. 2:25, narrated Shakik bin Salama, Abdullah said, whenever we prayed behind the Prophet, we used to recite, in sitting, Peace be on Gabriel, Michael, peace be on so and so. Once Allah's Messenger looked back at us and said, Allah himself is as salam, peace, and if any one of you prays then he should say, At-tahiyatu li Allahi wa salawatu wa titayabat. As salamu alalika ayyuha en-nabiyyu wa rahmatu Allahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadi Allahi as-salihin. All the compliments, prayers and good things are due to Allah, peace be on you, O Prophet, and Allah's mercy and blessings be on you. Peace be on us and on the pious subjects of Allah. If you say that, it will reach all the subjects in the heaven and the earth. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. I testify that there is no deity worthy of worship but Allah, and I testify that Muhammad is his slave and his apostle. 226, narrated Aisha sad-faced, the wife of the Prophet, Allah's messenger, used to invoke Allah in the prayer saying, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min adhabi el-kabr, wa a'udhu bika min fitnati el-masihi dajjal, wa a'udhu bika min fitnati el-maya wa fitnati el-mamat. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika mina el-mathami wa el-magram. O Allah, I seek refuge with you from the punishment of the grave, from the afflictions of the impostor, Messiah, and from the afflictions of life and death. O Allah, I seek refuge with you from sins and from debt. Somebody said to him, why do you so frequently seek refuge with Allah from being in debt? The Prophet replied, a person in debt tells lies whenever he speaks, and breaks promises whenever he makes them. Aisha also narrated, I heard Allah's messenger, in his prayer seeking refuge with Allah from the afflictions of Ad-Dajjal. 227, narrated Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, I asked Allah's messenger, to teach me an invocation so that I may invoke Allah with it in my prayer. He told me to say, Allahumma inni zalamtu nafsi zulman kathiran, wala yafir dh danuba illa anta, faghfir li magfiratan min indika, wa arhamni, innaka anta el-ghafuru ar-rahim, O Allah. I have done great injustice to myself and none except you forgive sins, so bestow on me a forgiveness from you, and have mercy on me, you are the forgiver, the merciful. 228, narrated Abdullah, when we prayed with the Prophet, we used to say, peace be on Allah from his slaves and peace be on so and so. The Prophet said, don't say as-salam be on Allah, for he himself is as-salam, but say, At-tahiyatu li Allahi wa as-salawatu wa titayabat. As-salamu alayka ayyuha en-nabiyyu wa rahmatu Allahi wa barakatuh. As-salamu alayna wa ala ibadi Allahi as-salihin. If you say this, then it will reach all the slaves in heaven or between heaven and earth. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Then select the invocation you like best and recite it. See Hadith No. 229, narrated Abu Said al-Khudri, I saw Allah's messenger, prostrating in mud and water and saw the mark of mud on his forehead. 230, narrated Salama, whenever Allah's messenger finished his prayers with taslim, the women would get up and he would stay on for a while in his place before getting up. Ibn Shihab said, I think, and Allah knows better, that the purpose of his stay was that the women might leave before the men who had finished their prayer. 231, narrated Itban bin Malik, we prayed with the Prophet, and used to finish our prayer with the taslim along with him. 232, narrated Mahmud bin Arabi, I remember Allah's messenger, and also the mouthful of water which he took from a bucket in our house and ejected on me. I heard from Itban bin Malik al-Ansari, who was one from Bani Salim, saying, I used to lead my tribe of Bani Salim in prayer. Once I went to the Prophet, and said to him, I have weak eyesight and at times the rainwater flood intervenes between me and the mosque of my tribe, and I wish that you would come to my house and pray at some place so that I could take that place as a place for praying, mosque. He said, Allah willing, I shall do that. Next day Allah's messenger, along with Abu Bakr, came to my house after the sun had risen high and he asked permission to enter. I gave him permission, but he didn't sit till he said to me, where do you want me to pray in your house? I pointed to a place in the house where I wanted him to pray. So he stood up for the prayer and we aligned behind him. He completed the prayer with taslim and we did the same simultaneously. 233, narrated Abu Mabad sad-faced, the freed slave of Ibn Abbas. Ibn Abbas told me, in the lifetime of the Prophet, it was the custom to celebrate Allah's praises aloud after the compulsory congregational prayers. Ibn Abbas further said, when I heard the Daikar would learn that the compulsory congregational prayer had ended. 234, narrated Ibn Abbas, I used to recognize the completion of the prayer of the Prophet, by hearing takbir. 235, narrated Abu Huraira, some poor people came to the Prophet, and said, the wealthy people will get higher grades and will have permanent enjoyment, and they pray like us and fast as we do. They have more money by which they perform the Hajj, and Umrah, fight and struggle in Allah's cause and give in charity. The Prophet said, shall I not tell you a thing upon which if you acted you would catch up with those who have surpassed you? Nobody would overtake you, and you would be better than the people amongst whom you live except those who would do the same. Say, Subhana Allah, Alhamdulillah and Allahu Akbar 33 times each after every compulsory prayer. We differed, and some of us said that we should say, Subhanallah 33 times and Alhamdulillah 33 times and Allahu Akbar 34 times. I went to the Prophet, who said, say, Subhanallah and Alhamdulillah and Allahu Akbar all together 33 times. 236, narrated Warad sad-faced the clerk of Al-Mughira bin Shuba. Once Al-Mughira dictated to me in a letter addressed to Muawiyah that the Prophet used to say after every compulsory prayer, La ilaha illa Allahu wahdahu la sharika lahu, lahu al-mulku wa lahu al-hamdu, wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. Allahumma la mania lima ataita, wa la mutiya lima manata, wa la yanfa daljadi minka el-jad. There is no deity but Allah, alone, no partner to him. His is the kingdom and all praise, and omnipotent is He. O Allah! Nobody can hold back what you gave, nobody can give what you held back, and no struggler's effort can benefit against you. And Al-Hasan said, Al-Jad means prosperity? 237, narrated Samura bin Jundub, the Prophet used to face us on completion of the prayer. 238, narrated Zayd bin Khalid al-Yuhani, the Prophet led us in the far prayer at Hudaybiyah after a rainy night. On completion of the prayer, he faced the people and said, do you know what your Lord has said, revealed? The people replied, Allah and His Apostle know better. He said, Allah has said, in this morning some of my slaves remained as true believers and some became non-believers. Whoever said that the rain was due to the blessings and the mercy of Allah had belief in me and he disbelieves in the stars, and whoever said that it rained because of a particular star had no belief in me but believes in that star. 239, narrated Anas bin Malik. Once the Prophet delayed the Isha prayer until midnight and then came to us. Having prayed he faced us and said, the people had prayed and slept but you were in the prayer as long as you were waiting for it. 240, narrated Nafi ibn Umar used to offer prayers, nawafil, at the place where he had offered the compulsory prayer. Al-Qasim bin Muhammad bin Abi Bakr did the same. The narration coming from Abu Huraira, from the Prophet, forbidding the Imam from offering prayers, optional prayer, at the same place where he was offered the compulsory prayer is incorrect. 241, narrated Salama, the Prophet, after finishing the prayer with Taslim used to stay at his place for a while. Ibn Shihab said, I think, and Allah knows better, that he used to wait for the departure of the women who had prayed. Ibn Shihab wrote that he had heard it from Hind bint al-Harith al-Firasiyya from Salama, the wife of the Prophet. Hind was from the companions of Salama, who said, when the Prophet finished the prayer with Taslim, the women would depart and enter their houses before Allah's Apostle departed. 242, narrated Uqba, I offered the Asr prayer behind the Prophet, at Medina. When he had finished the prayer with Taslim, he got up hurriedly and went out by crossing the rows of the people to one of the dwellings of his wives. The people got scared at his speed. The Prophet came back and found the people surprised at his haste and said to them, I remembered a piece of gold lying in my house and I did not like it to divert my attention from Allah's worship, so I have ordered it to be distributed in charity. 243, narrated Abdullah, you should not give away a part of your prayer to Satan by thinking that it is necessary to depart, after finishing the prayer, from one's right side only. I have seen the Prophet often leave from the left side. 244, narrated Ibn Umar, during the holy battle of Khaybar the Prophet said, whoever ate from this plant, i.e. garlic, should not enter our mosque. 245, narrated Atta, I heard Jabir bin Abdullah saying, the Prophet said, whoever eats from this plant, he meant garlic, should keep away from our mosque. I said, what does he mean by that? He replied, I think he means only raw garlic. 246, narrated Jabir bin Abdullah, the Prophet said, whoever eats garlic or onion should keep away from our mosque or should remain in his house. Jabir bin Abdullah, in another narration said, once a big pot containing cooked vegetables was brought. On finding unpleasant smell coming from it, the Prophet asked, what is in it? He was told all the names of the vegetables that were in it. The Prophet ordered that it should be brought near to some of his companions who were with him. When the Prophet saw it, he disliked to eat it and said, eat. I don't eat, for I converse with those whom you don't converse with, i.e. the angels. 247, narrated Abdul Aziz, a man asked Anas, what did you hear from the Prophet about garlic? He said, the Prophet said, whoever has eaten this plant should neither come near us nor pray with us. 248, narrated Sulayman ash-Shaybani, I heard Ash-Shabi saying, a person who was accompanying the Prophet, passed by a grave that was separated from the other graves, told me that the Prophet once led the people in the funeral prayer and the people had aligned behind him. I said, O Abba-Amr. Who told you about it? He said, Ibn Abbas. 249, narrated Abu Said al-Khudri, the Prophet said, Ghusl, taking a bath, on Friday is compulsory for every Muslim reaching the age of puberty. 250, narrated Ibn Abbas, one night I slept at the house of my aunt Maymuna and the Prophet slept, too. He got up, for prayer, in the last hours of the night and performed a light ablution from a hanging leather skin. Amr, the sub-narrator, described that the ablution was very light. Then he stood up for prayer and I got up too and performed the ablution in the same way and joined him on his left side. He pulled me to the right and prayed as much as Allah will. Then he lay down and slept and I heard his breath sounds till the Muaddin came to him to inform him about the prayer. He left with him for the prayer and prayed without repeating the ablution. Sufyan the sub-narrator said, we said to Amr, some people say, the eyes of the Prophet sleep but his heart never sleeps. Amr said, Ubay bin Umar said, the dreams of the prophets are divine inspirations. Then he recited, O my son, I have seen in dream that I was slaughtering you, offering you in sacrifice. 251, narrated Anas bin Malik, my grandmother Malaika invited Allah's Messenger, for a meal which she had prepared specially for him. He ate some of it and said, get up. I shall lead you in the prayer. I brought a mat that had become black owing to excessive use and I sprinkled water on it. Allah's Messenger stood on it and prayed 2 rakat, and the orphan was with me, in the first row, and the old lady stood behind us. 252, narrated Ibn Abbas, once I came riding a she-ass and I, then, had just attained the age of puberty. Allah's Messenger was leading the people in prayer at Mina facing no wall. I passed in front of the row and let loose the she-ass for grazing and joined the row and no one objected to my deed. 253, narrated Aisha, once Allah's Messenger delayed the Isha prayer till Umar informed him that the women and children had slept. Then Allah's Messenger came out and said, none from amongst the dwellers of earth have prayed this prayer except you. In those days none but the people of Medina prayed. 254, narrated Abdur Rahman bin Abi's, a person asked Ibn Abbas, have you ever presented yourself at the prayer with Allah's apostle? He replied, yes. And had it not been for my kinship, position, with the Prophet, it would not have been possible for me to do so, for he was too young. The Prophet went to the mark near the house of Kathir bin As-Salt and delivered a sermon. He then went towards the women. He advised and reminded them and asked them to give alms. So the woman would bring her hand near her neck and take off her necklace and put it in the garment of Bilal. Then the Prophet and Bilal came to the house. 255, narrated Aisha, once Allah's Messenger delayed the Isha prayer till Umar informed him that the women and children had slept. The Prophet came out and said, none except you from amongst the dwellers of earth is waiting for this prayer. In those days, there was no prayer except in Medina, and they used to pray the Isha prayer between the disappearance of the twilight and the first third of the night. 256, narrated Ibn Umar, the Prophet, said, if your women ask permission to go to the mosque at night, allow them. 257, narrated Salama, sad-faced, the wife of the Prophet, in the lifetime of Allah's Messenger, the women used to get up when they finished their compulsory prayers with taslim. The Prophet and the men would stay on at their places as long as Allah will. When the Prophet got up, the men would then get up. 258, narrated Aisha, when Allah's Messenger finished the far prayer, the women would leave covered in their sheets and were not recognized owing to the darkness. 259, narrated Abdullah bin Abi Qatada al-Ansari, my father said, Allah's Messenger said, whenever I stand for prayer, I want to prolong it, but on hearing the cries of a child, I would shorten it as I dislike to put its mother in trouble. 260, narrated Aisha, had Allah's Messenger known what the women were doing, he would have forbidden them from going to the mosque as the women of Bani Israel had been forbidden. Yahya bin Said, a sub-narrator, asked Amra, another sub-narrator, were the women of Bani Israel forbidden? She replied, yes. 261, narrated Salama, whenever Allah's Messenger completed the prayer with taslim, the women used to get up immediately and Allah's Messenger would remain at his place for someone before getting up. The sub-narrator, Az. Zuri, said, we think, and Allah knows better, that he did so that the women might leave before men could get in touch with them. 262, narrated Anas, the Prophet prayed in the house of Sulaim, and I, along with an orphan, stood behind him while Sulaim stood behind us. 263, narrated Aisha, Allah's Messenger used to offer the far prayer when it was still dark, and the believing women used to return, after finishing their prayer, and nobody could recognize them owing to darkness, or they could not recognize one another. 264, narrated Salim bin Abdullah, my father said, the Prophet said, if the wife of any one of you asks permission to go to the mosque, do not forbid her. 265, narrated Anas, the Prophet prayed in the house of Sulaim, and I, along with an orphan, stood behind him while Sulaim stood behind us. 266, narrated Salama, whenever Allah's Messenger completed the salat with taslim, the women used to get up immediately and Allah's Messenger would remain at his place for some time before getting up. The sub-narrator, Az. Zuri, said, we think, and Allah knows better, that he did so that the women might leave before the men could catch up with them.